Welcome to Poland. Most people believe they know Poland. They've been to Gdansk, to Warsaw, perhaps to Krakow. For centuries, Poland was the stage for tremendous conflicts and remarkable rebirths. Hardly any other country has been altered so often and yet preserved its identity. But how could a country that stood so often at the centre of European history at the same time preserve some of the most beautiful natural and cultural landscapes on the continent? And what wonders lie hidden between the steep peaks of the Tatras and the last primeval forest of Europe? All of this and much more you'll discover in today's episode, The Wonders of Poland. Nestled between Germany, Ukraine and the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad lies the 9th largest country in Europe. Today, around 37 million people live in this fascinating land. About 85% of them belong to the Roman Catholic Church. But Poland is far more than just numbers. For this country positively bursts with superlatives. Here you'll find the largest brick castle in the world, the last lowland primeval forest of Europe, and the only mine that operated continuously from the Middle Ages into modern times. A striking testament to this country's eventful past. And in the history of science, too, Poland has left its mark. Here was born none other than Marie Curie, to this day the only person to have won the Nobel Prize in 2 different scientific fields. The diversity of this country is hard to surpass. The landscapes range from 1,000-year-old primeval forests through which wild bison still roam today, to the mysteriously curved trees of krzywy las, the so-called crooked forest. So let us set off on a journey through the green heart of Europe. Our journey begins where the old Poland never lost its heart, in the southeast of the country, more precisely in Krakow. While most European cities lost their medieval cause in the war, the former royal city remained almost untouched. You feel exactly that the moment you step onto the Rynek Główny. The largest medieval market square in Europe suddenly opens before you, like a stone hall under the open sky. The towers of St Mary's Basilica float 40 metres above the rooftops, while in the centre of the square stretched the Cloth Hall, that centuries-old market hall where, even in the days of the Hanseatic League, spices, cloth and salt were traded. Horse-drawn carriages clatter over the cobblestones, pigeons rise in swarms, and from the surrounding cafes the scent of fresh pastries drifts across the square. On the hour, something happens that exists only here. From the taller of the 2 towers of St Mary's sounds the Haynał, a short trumpet melody that breaks off mid-note. According to legend, the trumpeter once died at exactly this moment, struck by an arrow as he warns the city of approaching enemies. Above it all towers the wotw. On a limestone hill right on the Vistula, the royal castle unites centuries of Polish power within a single complex. Here the country's kings were crowned. Here they lie buried in the adjoining Wawel Cathedral. The mixture of Gothic spires, Renaissance courtyards and Baroque domes tells of every era Poland has ever lived through. And deep beneath the hill, so the legend goes, sleeps a dragon, in whose honour a bronze statue on the riverbank still breathes fire today. The entire Old Town is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and was one of the very first sites ever placed on this list. History hides everywhere among the narrow lanes. Old university buildings where Copernicus once studied, a name we will encounter again later in the north. Small churches, hidden inner courtyards. Krakow is best discovered on foot when it comes to food too. On almost every corner, stalls sell the obwrzanek, a braided bread ring that has been baked here since the Middle Ages. In the cellar vaults of the Old Town, pierogi are served, filled dumplings, sometimes with potato and curd cheese, sometimes with meat or mushrooms. And on nearly every menu you'll find żurek, a sour soup based on fermented rye flour, often served in a hollowed-out loaf of bread. Krakow is the perfect prelude. For everything that defines Poland, history, beauty, but also deep wounds, begins right here. And some of these wounds lie closer than one might think. Just a few kilometres southeast of Krakow, an unremarkable entrance leads into a world one would never expect beneath the earth. The salt mine of Wieliczka was mined for over 700 years and today reaches more than 300 metres deep. More than 900 wooden steps lead down into a labyrinth of tunnels, shafts and chambers. But what the miners created down here over the centuries goes far beyond mere work. From the salt itself, they carved entire sculptures, reliefs and figures, even chandeliers whose crystals are made not of glass, but of purified rock salt. The centrepiece is the Chapel of St. Kinga, a complete underground cathedral more than 100 metres below the surface, carved entirely from salt. The walls, the floor, the altars, even the ornaments on the ceiling, everything gleams in the warm light, as if cut from frosted glass. Whole weddings are celebrated down here. Wieliczka is the only mine in the world that operated continuously from the Middle Ages into modern times, and it is one of the very oldest World Heritage Sites of all. You expect a mine. You are welcomed by a cathedral of salt. Back at the surface, to where the south of Poland slowly rises into the mountains. In the Pieniny National Park, the river Dunajec has carved a deep gorge through the limestone mountains over thousands of years. Rugged white rock walls rise almost vertically on either side, while the green water squeezes through in tight bends. The gorge is travelled in a way that has barely changed for generations. Experienced raftsmen steer narrow wooden rafts through the current, individual tree trunks, bound together with ropes, guided solely with long poles. There are no engines, no noise, only the lapping of the water and the creaking of the wood. Whoever seeks peace will find it here on the water, just before the mountains to the south grow far more mighty still. Where Poland rises highest lies its most famous mountain town. Zakopane is regarded as the country's unofficial winter capital and nestles right at the foot of the Tatras. The scene here is defined by wood. The region's traditional houses, with their steep pointed roofs and intricately carved gables, characterise entire streets. This distinctive building style arose from the culture of the Górals, the mountain dwellers, whose customs, music and costumes are still alive today. On the famous promenade Kropowki, the sound of fiddles mingles with the bustle of the market stalls. One flavour belongs inseparably to this region, the oskipek. This smoked sheep's cheese is pressed into artful shapes, smoked golden brown over an open fire, and often served warm with cranberries. Zakopane is the gateway to the mountains, and this gate opens onto a landscape that surpasses everything seen so far. Right behind Zakopane begins the most spectacular mountain landscape in Poland. The High Tatras are the country's only true high mountain range, a jagged ridge of granite that forms the border with Slovakia and, with Rysy, marks Poland's highest point at over 2,400 metres. Poland has about 70 named peaks above 2,000 metres, and they all lie, without exception, here in the Tatras. In the shadow of these peaks lies perhaps the country's best-known postcard motif, the Morskie Oko, the Eye of the Sea. The dark green mountain lake reflects the surrounding rock walls so clearly that sky and stone merge in the water. It owes its name to an old legend, according to which it is connected to the sea through underground passages. But the lake is only the beginning. Higher up, numerous other mountain lakes hide away, framed by bare rock cirques, while cold waterfalls plunge down the slopes. Up here, the gentle Poland of market squares and churches comes to an end. What remains is stone, water, and silence, before we descend again, back into the world of palaces and castles. North of the mountains, an unusual rocky landscape stretches across the land. The Krakow Częstochowa Jura, a chain of white limestone rocks on which an entire series of castles was once built. To this day, they are called the Eagle's Nests. The most impressive among them is the castle ruin of Ogrodzieniec. It was built directly on and around the natural rocks, so that in places masonry and stone can scarcely be told apart. Towers grow out of the bare rock, staircases lead through clefts in the stone, and they bear witness to the elegance of this former Renaissance residence. But not all places are visited because they are beautiful, rather because they must never be forgotten. An hour west of Krakow, in a landscape of silent fields and unremarkable birches, lies Auschwitz. Here, behind barbed wire and brick barracks, the National Socialists murdered more than 1 million people. It was the largest extermination site of the Holocaust. Whoever steps through the gate senses at once that every word here becomes too small. The wind sweeps across the endless grounds, over the long rows of empty shoes, the suitcases with engraved names, the rusty rails that lead into nothing. It is a silence that weighs heavier than any noise, a silence that asks what human beings are capable of. Today, Auschwitz is a memorial and a warning to the whole world. One leaves this place changed, with the quiet, urgent promise that history must never repeat itself. And perhaps it is precisely this memory that must be carried onward, as the journey continues over into the west of the country. After the heaviness of Auschwitz, the journey needs a place that brings back wonder. On the way west, it suddenly appears between the trees, and at first hardly anyone believes this building is real. Mosna Castle possesses no fewer than 99 towers. Spires, oriels and pinnacles wind off in every direction, a wild mixture of neo-Gothic, Baroque and Renaissance, set within a sprawling park of azaleas and old oaks. In spring, when the blossoms bathe the park in colour, the site resembles a film set. It is said that no single architect ever possessed a complete plan of this castle. Over the decades, it simply kept growing. The result looks as if someone had cast a Disney fairy tale in stone, except that this one really exists. The southwest of Poland is a land of castles, and none embodies the mysterious quite like Chocha Castle. Perched high above a reservoir, with thick towers and steep roofs, it seems as though it had fallen straight from the pages of a wizard's novel. In fact, the complex has served again and again as a film location, and visitors are inevitably reminded of the halls of Hogwarts. Behind the bookshelves, passageways suddenly open up. Heavy wall panelling turns out to be camouflage for narrow tunnels. Here, fantasy becomes tangible, and the southwest holds far more of it in store. Along the border with the Czech Republic rises the Giant Mountains, in Polish Karkonosze. It is the highest elevation of the entire Sudetes, and its highest point, Śnieżka, Schneekoppe, often rises into the clouds at over 1,600 meters. The mountains have a character all their own. Here and there, waterfalls plunge into the depths, such as the Kamienczyk waterfall, the highest in the Polish Giant Mountains. In fog, when the rocks turn to shadows, you understand where such stories come from. Embedded in dense forests, Książ Castle, in German Fürstenstein, towers on a rocky spur high above a ravine. It is the third largest castle in Poland and unfolds its splendour across magnificent terraced gardens that descend the sloop hole in steps. During the Second World War, the Nazi regime had a vast system of tunnels driven deep into the rock beneath the castle. What exactly these underground installations were meant to serve has never been fully clarified to this day, and this very riddle runs like a red thread through the entire region. For only a few kilometers away, this riddle grows greater still. The Owl Mountains, in Polish Góry Sowi, appear at first glance like a peaceful, wooded, low mountain range with scattered castle ruins. Yet beneath its slopes lies one of the greatest secrets of the Second World War. Here the Nazi regime, under the codename Riese, giant, had a huge, top-secret tunnel system blasted into the mountains. Kilometers of tunnels, chambers and shafts were dug by forced laborers under inhuman conditions. The project was never completed, and its true purpose never officially confirmed. Whether myth or truth, the Owl Mountains guard their secrets well. Few of Poland's landscapes are as whimsical as the Table Mountains. The Stołowe Mountains are a tabletop range whose summits do not taper to a point, but appear flat-topped, as if sliced off. Over millions of years, erosion has shaped a veritable open-air museum from the soft sandstone. In Zieleniec Wielki, the highest point, narrow paths wind through an actual labyrinth of rock, tight clefts through which you must squeeze sideways, and steep staircases between towering blocks of stone. The southwest concludes with one of the country's liveliest cities. Wrocław, the former Breslau, is built on countless islands threaded through by arms of the Oder. More than 100 bridges connect the districts to one another. Hardly any other European city has more. At the centre lies one of the most beautiful market squares in Poland, lined with colourful townhouses in pastel tones and overlooked by the Gothic town hall. But the city's most charming secret lies at ground level. All over Wrocław, tiny bronze dwarfs hide. From a political symbol of protest in the 1980s, several hundred of these little figures have since emerged. Searching for them has become a game in its own right, and, quite incidentally, leads you through the loveliest corners of the city. Between the mountainous south and the Baltic coast in the north lies, moreover, a city that many travellers overlook, unjustly so. Bydgoszcz, in German Bromberg, is threaded through by canals and the riverbend of the Bruder, and it is precisely this water that has earned it a nickname, the Little Amsterdam. Along the river stand old granary houses whose brick facades are reflected in the water. On one of the locks, the famous sculpture, the tightrope walker over the Bruder, balances seemingly weightlessly above the river. Whoever glides through the canals by boat experiences a city that lives entirely from its connection to the water. Only a short distance further awaits one of the best preserved medieval cities in Poland. Torun, in German Thorn, survived the centuries almost unscathed. Its old town of red brick is a CES World Heritage Site. Brick Gothic shapes everything here. Defiant city gates, mighty churches, and an imposing town hall that rises in the middle of the market square. Among the narrow lanes, time seems to have stood still. Above all, however, Torun is the birthplace of a man whose name we already encountered in Krakow, Nicolaus Copernicus. Here the astronomer came into the world who placed the sun at the centre of the universe and thereby changed our view of the world forever. His birthplace still stands today, and his statues adorn the city. Now we travel to the north of Poland, for some, the most beautiful region of the country. Some structures here defy all imagination, and Malbork Castle is exactly one of them. On the bank of the Nogat River rises the largest brick castle in the world, a colossus of millions of red bricks stretching across an area of several football fields. It was built by the Teutonic Order, that medieval order of knights which ruled over vast parts of the Baltic region from here. Malbork was not merely a fortress, but the seat of its power, a city of walls with courtyards, chapels, dining halls, and an ingenious defensive system of interlocking castle sections. Stepping through the mighty gates into the inner courtyard, you feel transported back by centuries. At sunset, when the brick red begins to glow and the entire complex is mirrored in the waters of the Nogat, you understand why this place is counted among the UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Not far from Malbork lies hidden a technical marvel that seems impossible at first glance. Near Elbląg, ships cross dry land. They travel over meadows. This is made possible by the Elbląg Canal from the 19th century. Instead of conventional locks, it overcomes the difference in elevation with so-called inclined planes. The ships are lifted onto rolling carriages and pulled overland on rails before plunging back into the water at the next level. From the bank, it truly looks as though an entire boat were gliding through the middle of the green landscape. At the mouth of the Vistula, where it meets the Baltic Sea, lies a city whose wealth is still visible today. Gdansk was for centuries the most powerful member of the Hanseatic League in the Baltic region, a trading centre through which amber, grain and gold flowed. The heart of the city is the Long Lane, a magnificent promenade lined with narrow, tall townhouses in radiant colours. Each facade is decorated differently, with golden ornaments, reliefs and artful gables, a stone showcase of bygone prosperity. At the end of the lane, the view opens onto the harbour. There stands the landmark of Gdansk, the Crane Gate. The enormous medieval wooden crane at the water's edge could once lift loads weighing tons and raise ships' masts, powered solely by people walking inside vast wooden treadwheels. Along its waterfront promenade, the city's old trade still lives on in the windows and stalls of countless merchants. They sell amber. Here it's called Baltic gold, and for good reason. It was this very stone that once made Gdansk rich and drew traders here from across the continent. Gdansk has shaped the history of Europe in many ways. After the German attack on the Westerplatte in 1939, the Second World War began here, a conflict that shook the world to its core. Decades later, the city made history once again, when in 1980, the Solidarność movement arose in the shipyards of Gdansk. What began as a strike eventually led to a mass movement that helped bring about the fall of the Iron Curtain. St Mary's Church, the beautiful old town, the riverside promenade along the Motława. Those who have followed our channel for a while know of our love for this beautiful city. Gdansk is history that can be smelled, heard, and touched. Directly north of Gdansk borders the elegant seaside resort of Sopot. Its pride reaches far out into the sea, the longest wooden pier in Europe, a walkway over 500 metres long on which one can stroll far out over the waves. Behind it stretches an elegant beach promenade with villas from the Belle Époque, where the charm of the old spa era still lingers. In the middle of the town, one building causes amazement. The Crooked House, a facade that bends and curves as though viewed in a mirror made of water. It has become one of the most photographed motifs in Poland. When one thinks of Poland, one rarely thinks of a desert. And yet that is exactly what hides along the Baltic coast, the Słowinski National Park, often called the Polish Sahara. Between sea and lakes rise mighty shifting dunes, some over 30 metres high. Each year the wind drives them several metres inland, so that they slowly roll over forests and bury entire trees beneath them. Those who walk barefoot over the soft, pale sand might for a moment forget that only a few steps away, the cool Baltic Sea is crashing against the shore. Behind the dunes lie quiet lagoons and expansive reed beds, a paradise for migratory birds. The northwest concludes with a region that does not necessarily look like a typical Polish one, the Hel Peninsula. Like a thin finger, it stretches almost 35 kilometers out into the Baltic Sea. In some places, this strip of land is barely more than a few hundred meters wide, with water on both sides. It is precisely this unusual location that gives it its charm. Long, fine, sandy beaches line both coasts, behind which small fishing villages and wind-bent pine forests crouch. Seals frolic off the coast, and the salty breeze blows here from all directions at once. The northeast of Poland is likewise a world of water and forest. The Masurian Lake District encompasses over 2,000 lakes, connected by rivers and canals into a vast interconnected network. For sailors, this region is a paradise. For days one can glide from lake to lake without seeing the same bay twice, passing dense forests and reed-covered shores. Where the south of Poland lived from stone and height, the northeast lives from vastness and water. In the middle of this labyrinth of lakes lies the secret centre of Masuria. Mikołajki is a lively little town on the water, whose harbour fills in the summer months with sailing boats from all over the country. Colourful houses line the promenade, cafes and boat jetties string along the shore, and over it all lies that relaxed mood of a place wholly governed by the rhythm of the water. From here, most travellers set out on their tours across the lakes. In the far northeast, the land grows even more pristine. On the border with Belarus stands perhaps the most precious forest of the continent. The Białowieża Forest is the last true primeval forest of Europe. A piece of lowland woodland has once covered vast parts of the continent, before humankind cleared it almost everywhere. Yet this forest is famous above all for one animal, the wisent, the mighty European bison. The heaviest land mammal of the continent was once nearly extinct, and survived, of all places, here. Today, hundreds of these prehistoric colossi once again roam the thicket. Weighing up to 900 kilograms and standing nearly 2 meters at the shoulder, the animals seem like relics of a long-vanished age. Especially in the early morning hours or just before sunset, visits can be observed in forest clearings. A rare natural spectacle that reminds visitors of the original wilderness of Europe and makes the Białowieża primeval forest one of the most important nature reserves of the continent. Those who stand among its ancient trunks gaze into a time that exists almost nowhere else. Before our journey ends in the capital, we make 2 more stops in the east of the country. The first leads to the Wieliczka, into one of Poland's most charming little towns, Kazimierz Dolny. For over a century, this place has drawn painters, sculptors and writers. Not without reason is it regarded as the artists' town of Poland. Around the picturesque market square crowd historic townhouses with richly decorated facades, small galleries and workshops. Above the town tower the remains of a medieval castle ruin and the freestanding tower on the neighbouring hill. From up there, the gaze sweeps far over the glittering ribbon of the Wieliczka and the gentle hills all around. That light which has lured generations of artists here. A little further east lies the largest city of this region. Lublin is a gateway between west and east, a place where over the centuries Polish, Jewish, Lithuanian and Ruthenian cultures met. The colourful old town with its winding alleys is overtowered by the mighty royal castle, inside of which a late Gothic chapel with frescoes of Byzantine appearance lies hidden, a rare fusion of 2 worlds. Lublin carries the eventful cultural history of eastern Poland within its walls, and is at the same time a young, vibrant university city. From here, it is not far to the destination of our journey, the beating heart of the country, the capital, Warsaw. A city of contrasts, in which socialist behemoths, glass skyscrapers, and Baroque palaces meet in the closest of quarters. At its centre lies the old town with the royal castle, once the residence of the Polish kings, and the lively market square, over which the statue of the Warsaw Mermaid watches over the city. A few steps further rises the Palace of Culture, a gigantic tower in the style of Soviet wedding cake architecture, a stone legacy of the communist era that dominates the skyline to this day. Those wishing to escape the bustle find green tranquility in the Łazienki Park. Among old trees, ponds and strutting peacocks stands here the elegant palace on the water, a summer residence that seems to float in the middle of a lake. On the edge of the city, finally, lies Wielano Palace, a magnificent Baroque residence with sprawling gardens, which is not for nothing called the Polish Versailles. Yet the most astonishing thing about Warsaw becomes apparent only when one knows its history. In the Second World War, this city was almost entirely razed to the ground. Over 80% of the building fabric lay in ruins. The old town that one marvels at today simply no longer existed at the end of the war. It was a field of rubble and ashes. And then something happened that has scarcely a second example. The people refused to give up their city. Stone by stone, facade by facade, they rebuilt the old town. From old paintings, photographs and memories, until it stood once more as though nothing had ever happened. What today seems so old and so self-evident is in truth a monument to will, a victory of memory over destruction. And so the circle closes. From Krakow, which survived the war, to Warsaw, which rose again from its own ashes. Poland does not hide its wounds. Poland does not proclaim its beauty loudly. One must travel here to truly understand the green heart of Europe, and perhaps that is precisely its greatest wonder. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed our journey through Poland today. If you did, feel free to leave a like and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos. Until next time.